Welcome to Alphacenturian. I'll be your guide. This guy came up on my feed. He's talking about Mike Winger. As you know, I have a long history with Mike Winger on this channel. I am not a fan. I recently took down my takedown videos of him because I thought I was being uncharitable. So here's an interesting challenge. I am going to try to steelman Mike Winger's positions that this gentleman is going to be countering. So let's check it out.
Brandon, and today's another Tuesday takedown video and another Mike Winger video. I know we just covered him also on the Saturday short, so I apologize. I'm not trying to inundate you with Mike Winger. I'm not trying to personally attack him. I have no vendetta against him. He just shows up in my feed so often, and some of the things he says, I can't help but want to respond to. So this is going to go one of two ways. Either I won't talk about him for a very long time, or let's just ride this train and create a whole series responding to Mike Winger.
I don't recommend doing that because I did that and you just end up ranting against him. Mind you, I am a Christian. Mike Winger's a Christian. I'm also a Catholic. So as you can guess, me and Mike don't really agree on too many things outside of there being a God. But I don't think the right approach is to just try to counter everything he says. Mike Winger is very low-hanging fruit when it comes to his apologetics. But he has thousands of subscribers on his channel. He is a very big YouTuber. So the message of nice works for a lot of people. Intellectual analytics, philosophy does not. And anti-theism is a very small niche. So you might be large in your niche, but Mike Winger probably has a much larger much broader appeal than either you or I.
People have said, oh, it's a softball. Mike Winger is so ridiculous. Mike Winger has a huge following. Mike Winger has a ton of content. In today's video, he's talking about divine hiddenness. This is not some fundamentalist softball anti-evolution BS that is so easy to refute. This is a real philosophical issue against the case for God. And knowing what a platform Mike has and his horrific response to this, I felt compelled to say something back. So what is divine hiddenness? I'm not going to go through the entire layout because I think that you can interpret it in a lot of different ways, but in some capacity, it is just, where is God? And if I can't find God, and it's so hard to find God, maybe God's not real. Now,
okay, so in the Christian Orthodox or classical theological position, divine hiddenness would be more referred to as mystery. Currently, I am reading Origin. Oh, the bag of worms. But Origin would say, paraphrasing, that since God is an intellectual being, there is no anamorphism. You're not going to have any physical characteristics. In fact, it's wrong to even project human thought onto God or human reasoning onto God. Instead, as a purely intellectual being, he is not material. He is not matter. He is also outside of time. God is a purely intellectual being. 3 parts: mind, word, and breath are Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. You get the idea. Love, wisdom, and I think being or actualness. So that's kind of how it goes with Trinitarian theology. But divine hiddenness would be mystery, or as Origin would say, both a mystery and an apparent paradox. We say apparent just as we would say apparent contradictions in the Bible. Okay, let's not worry about that. Let's continue on with this guy's complaint. But Mike Winger is not using heavy theological terms. He's not using the traditional Christian terminology for a lot of this stuff. He's not using the philosophical terminology. He's not even using the theological terminology sometimes, which is why I say he comes off as very low-hanging fruit, and it's very easy for atheists to counter him. Mike Winger is given a very simplistic, very easy answers, which is probably why he's very popular.
Some of you would take issue with that, and again, I'm acknowledging there are other iterations of this. It can be from the physical sense of divine hiddenness. God used to walk with Adam. God showed up to Abraham and Moses. God came down and walked among us.
Okay, so These are not great examples. First off, in the Jewish tradition, you would have the angel of God or the Metatron being the actual being that was interacting, because no creature can see God or hear God, actual God, without being completely destroyed. In Christology, Jesus is the image of God. So the reason why we can see Jesus is because he's human and he's also divine, the hypostatic union. So when you look at Jesus, you're seeing the image of God. He is the image bearer. But only he can know God, because again, God is an intellectual being. So only the Son can know the Father, and only the Father can know the Son. But by knowing the Son, you can know the Father. And it is the love, or the Holy Spirit, the spiration, that connects you to God. There's other things he's going to come up on later, which is theosis.
For 33 years, and then poof, no more physical God. It can be on the spiritual side. I reach out to God, I pray, I beg for divine revelation, and I hear no answer.
So in Christianity and in Judaism, God's talking to you every day. God's all around you. You're choosing not to acknowledge him, right? That's kind of what he's getting to. I'll wait until Mike Winger starts talking about this, but he's getting a lot wrong here, which makes me think he comes from a tradition where it's more of a personal anthropomorphic God, and that's not who God is. God is not a white man sitting on a puffy cloud, as Sneeko likes to say.
Where is God? This divine hiddenness. And it doesn't seem to affect everyone, which is one of the cases Mike makes that's really poor. But we'll get into Mike's arguments here in just a second. So that's it in a nutshell. And it's a huge issue for me because I was a believer for 30 years. I did my time for God. And during my 3 years or so of doubting and transitioning and trying to hold on to this and wanting this to be true, despite what I was hearing and seeing, I got crickets back from God. Christian excuses for this are reprehensible, telling me I didn't have enough faith, or I wasn't sincere enough, or I wasn't patient enough, or if I just prayed this kind of way. And I've explained all this before in my deconversion video, and go look at the comments. Christian after Christian after Christian, you were never really Christian, you never really believed, you didn't want.
So there is a type of Christianity that says what he says, that believes in a thing called once saved, only saved. The problem with that theology is then how do you explain someone who is an apostate? How do you explain someone who converts but then commits grievous sin? The way their answer is that, well, then you were never really Christian to begin with. But that doesn't work, because once saved, only saved is a heresy. It's not true. You can fall away. So a great example of this is Jesus's metaphor or analogy of the vine. So there's the true vine, which is Judaism, and you can break branches off, which are the Jews or the Jewish people who reject Jesus or reject the true law of God, and then you can be grafted in, which is the adopted people, the Gentiles, and just as easily as you can be grafted in, you can be taken off. And Christianity, or the one true religion, can't be completed until the original branches are brought back on. So you need to have the Jews and the Christians being one people. Okay? There's going to be some others, let's call it American evangelical presumptions, that he's going to mention that's may have led to his atheism, or at least to his anti-theism after he reached an agnostic or atheistic level.
You wanted to be handed over to your sin, etc., etc., etc. It's disgusting. So yes, it's a bit of a personal issue, which Mike also uses to devalue the argument. But isn't this supposed to be a personal thing? Didn't the creator of the universe want a personal connection to me? Didn't he care about me?
No, and yes, but no, and yes. So does God care about you individually? Yes. Are you more important than anyone else? No. Does that seem fair? Probably not. Does God have favorites? Yes, he does. Are you one of his favorites? Who knows?
For God so loved the whole world? Or is that only convenient when we want to talk about God's love and not God's seemingly lack of love? So I'll stop preaching for a second.
So the whole God is love thing gets abused and, let's just say, misinterpreted. God also judges. People like to say God doesn't send people to hell, but he judges. If you disobey him, if you, let's say, condemn yourself, if you want to go that way, you want to be really a nice Christian about it. But no, God judges. There are people in hell. It's just how it goes.
The hiddenness of God is one of the, it's simultaneously a philosophical argument against God's existence, or at least against God's love. And on the other hand, it is also a very emotionally heavy and influential argument. Often the more philosophical arguments aren't emotionally very...
I'm so happy I unsubscribed from this guy.
Impactful, I think. A lot of times, like I look at, say, the Kalam cosmological argument, I go, that's a really good argument for God's existence, but I don't know how much it strikes people's emotions. I look at the
So one of the things, that's a terrible, let's go.
Moral argument, and I go,
One of the terrible things about Mike Winger is that he's all emotional appeal. And I found that very frustrating when I was breaking down his arguments against Catholicism. He wasn't using logic, he wasn't using reason, he wasn't even using historical verifiable facts. He was just using emotional appeal and then straw manning. And that drove me crazy, and it brought out the worst in me. It made me be very uncharitable to him. And I have apologized to him on this channel for that, and I've taken down those videos. But I can see how someone who is an atheist would hear what he's saying. And even though Mike thinks he's being charitable and kind, the atheist or the man of reason, the naturalist, and the humanist would be extremely offended and insulted by Mike Winger's words and his lack of charity to non-Christians.
that one hits people's emotions and it's intellectually strong as well. This kind of hits both.
So yeah, so far, absolutely no issues. I think he's right. I think that there are many different arguments for both God's existence and God's, he says, love. But however you define it, there are philosophical approaches, there are personal responses, there's kind of a third category, which is scriptural issues, right? Using the Bible to prove itself or disprove itself, and a whole host of other sub-genres. But yes, he's right. This is a more personal...
The Bible can neither prove nor disprove itself. That's circular logic.
One, granted.
And the hiddenness argument goes something like this. And I'm just going to, something like this. I don't have a syllogism before me to present to you, but it goes something like this. If God really loves people and he wants them to know him and he wants them to follow him, he would make efforts to reveal himself to those people, right? So if you had a sincere non-believer, a non-believer who was sincerely looking and searching for God, but not finding God, that would perhaps prove that God doesn't really love them and want them saved.
So I think it's a pretty good definition of